So Congress is gearing up for a fight over the debt ceiling. Many economists say we shouldn't even be worried about our debt. So we put those two things together for the National Taxpayers Union senior fellow, Mattie Duppler, who joins us now. And it's interesting, Mattie, because to try to separate it maybe makes sense as well, because the debt ceiling in and of itself, even if you care about the debt, I've always wondered about whether this debt ceiling as a mechanism even makes sense.
Right.
Because there's some money we've already committed to spend, and now we're kind of raising the ceiling for that. What's your view on that first?
Well, the debt ceiling in the past has been used as a point of leverage to do what it's supposed to do, which is decrease our spending, which leads to more debt. Now, the question, of course, always becomes a political one, whether or not the parties in power are willing to use it. Now, when Democrats were in control of the House, they did something interesting. They would attach the debt limit vote to the budget resolution, which essentially meant that they never voted on the debt limit. It would just be deemed to be raised along with the budget resolution and however much that budget resolution spent. So when Republicans took over in 2010, they used it as a tool and a point of leverage to decrease the spending, the discretionary spending increases that were put into place under Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Harry Reid. That was pretty significant. As a result, we got the Budget Control Act, which put into place sequester, which are those automatic spending cuts that go into effect every year if Congress can't reach a resolution on the budget. That really may seem insignificant, but over the long term would cut $1.5 trillion in spending from federal baselines.
I guess it seems not insignificant, but I guess the reason it doesn't get as much attention is because even with all of that, at the end of the day, as you know, we still have a deficit issue, and we certainly have an issue with our national debt with the topping $22 trillion, even with all of that.
That's exactly right. And the Budget Control Act in 2010, that only took aim at discretionary spending. We all know the big drivers of our debt are those mandatory spending systems. That's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. That takes a lot more power in Congress to get a resolution on those things. And unfortunately, it requires bipartisan agreement in order to start to scroll back some of the spending on those programs.
Plus, you have, a school of thought out there, and the Journal wrote about this, where people, it's not people that are necessarily thought to be out there on some kind of a political spectrum. This is fairly mainstream economists who are coming out to one degree or another saying that either the debt doesn't matter, that's very extreme, but more to the point of saying, hey, it doesn't matter as much as you think, and we have a little bit more space in here, a little bit more time before we need to think about it. So that seems to be kind of the popular thought right now. Would you push back against it, or?
I certainly would. I think that it's a little bit silly to say that debt and deficits don't matter, because we know over time they certainly do. The other problem is that when you hear an economist say debt doesn't matter, they're likely referring to the fact that in one instance, one spot in time, debt is not the most pressing issue, because we have a whole host of other public policy problems that politicians are charged with solving. But over time, of course, those same politicians need to be able to look into the future and start taking action now for a crisis that is looming large in several years. You
know, you're asking a lot. We need the trigger, right? It's going to have to be, I think, market-based, probably something with interest rates. I mean, you need a reason to care if you're a politician, don't you?
Well, and that's the difficulty of the debt limit. While some economists might want to say that it's not very relevant, certainly it is very important to investors and business owners and market watchers who who see the debt limit and the negotiating over it as a destabilizing effect on markets. And as we saw last time around, Moody's threatened to decrease the rating on United States debt. That created a bunch of tremors throughout the market that ultimately led to a lot of anxiety about whether or not the United States can move forward when it comes to negotiating over the debt limit.
Exactly. Mattie, good to see you. Mattie Duppler,
good to see you.
Thanks for coming on. Always appreciate it. Now, on another topic, despite warnings from the United States, interesting to note today that we found out that Germany apparently is considering allowing this Chinese